Hello, welcome to faithtalks.com. I'm your host, Mercy Hope, and today my guest is Jonathan Cahn. He is the author of the book, The Harbinger. And so we are going to jump right into talking about this book that has been quite a phenomenon. It's been the book that I have discussed with more people this year than any other by far. It is the one must read. And so, but for anybody out there who has not read it, even after I keep telling them to read it, I'd like you to just talk a little bit about this concept and how the Harbinger actually became a book, this idea.
Okay. Well, The Harbinger is, the subtitle is The Ancient Mystery That Holds the Secret of America's Future. And it is a mystery from the Bible that goes back over 2,500 years ago that lies behind everything from 9/11 to the collapse of the economy, and something that's so specific that it gives exact dates, exact down to the hours of when things happen. It gives words that American leaders speak before they say them, and it goes back to the last days of ancient Israel when 9 harbingers or 9 prophetic warnings appear in the land. And the scary thing or the amazing thing is that the same 9 harbingers that appeared in the last days of Israel are now reappearing on American soil. And some have appeared in New York City, some have appeared in Washington, D.C., some involve the President of the United States or national leaders. And it affects everything from, the economy to politics to everyone's future. And since the book came out, it's been coming true after the book came out. The Harbingers are still, it's continuing continuously since then. So that's in a nutshell, what the Harbinger is. And we can, we can touch on some things in it.
Yeah.
But how it happened is, I'm kind of stationed outside New York City in northern Jersey. So when 9/11 happened, we could see it. And I was praying.
Wow.
I was praying, and I came to a scripture which was, or actually the chapters, Isaiah 9 and 10. I was immediately led to that, which was about the first warning strike of, of judgment on a nation. And I saw that connection about a week later. I didn't find out this till much later. David Wilkerson, who was speaking in Times Square Church, pastor, he told his congregation, there's a word to America from God, and the word is, and he read the same section, and specifically Isaiah 9:10, which is the really the key of the Harbingers. And he didn't do it because he saw the Harbingers, because most of them came after. He just got this from the Lord, and he said that this is the word. He read Isaiah 9:10, and then later on, I was in New York City, and I was at Ground Zero, and my attention's being drawn to an object, and something says, seek this out. There's something there you have to find. And so I start looking up, and it becomes the first puzzle piece of this mystery that keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger until I was blown away by it. And when I first started sharing a little bit to my congregation, everybody was blown away and said, this has got to go forth to the nation. Everybody had the same reaction.
Yes.
So that's how it kind of had a life of its own. It was always like, it always had a life to kind of go to the nation. People would get the tape of me talking about it and put it on the web. And then later I started writing a book. And when I started writing it in the form that you read it, with a prophet, revealing this through these seals, it literally flowed as if the book was already written. Every time I sat down, it just flowed as if every word was already there. It happened rapid fire, happened rapidly. And within a few months it was done. And then becoming a book was a supernatural thing too.
So when I was reading it, it was one of those things, and I'll be honest, when I first picked up the book and understood the concept was going to be a prophecy from the Bible that applied to America today, I'll be honest, my first instinct was skepticism.
Of course.
It was like, okay, how, this is definitely going to be fiction.
Yeah.
So as I start reading it, and I actually simultaneously had a friend who's on the internet verifying, that these things happened. It got crazy. It just started blowing my mind and going, wow. And it obviously that it had to be supernatural, even the revelation of it. But then for those who have read it or have not read it yet, then in my mind I'm trying to differentiate the fact and the fiction.
Right.
So the prophet and how the prophet presents it, that was the fictional aspect, but what the prophet said about the Harbingers was true.
And you probably put it more exactly than anybody. Just that's it right there.
Okay.
Yeah. See, originally when I started writing it, I was, and originally when I was sharing it, I wrote it straight out when I first was writing it down as, nonfiction, because it's really nonfiction. It's real. The whole thing. That's the whole point of it. But then once I wrote it, when I was first writing it, I then got a thing saying, no, you have to redo this. And when you redo it, it's like as if, in the Bible, God uses stories and parables and symbols and imageries to convey spiritual truth or prophetic truth. And so the Harbinger has a lot of deep things in it. So to make it very accessible and very easy to to get it, it came to me in the same way. It came to me like in one day. The whole thing, that moment, it came. I saw the prophet, the man receiving it, the seals. All that happened like it just hit me at once. I was like, and I thought I'm never going to, I've thought of doing books like that. I've never written a book before, but I always felt to do it. But I said, not with the Harbinger, but then as soon as that came, it said, that's right, it's right.
Wow.
And so it just really also, that just kind of came together like that. So the prophet, is revealing these things through these seals. Each one has a mystery to be opened up. But what is revealed, which is the majority of the book, is all real. It's all what's happening in America. It's all this absolutely real thing. So that's how to distinguish it. What is being shared. It's like the story is a delivery system. It's a vessel to deliver this truth.
And it makes it so exciting again and so easy to follow. It's just because, and really, that's part of the mind-blowing part of it, is that you're reading a story that feels like a movie out of Hollywood, but it's real. And then you realize the weight of it hits you at the end, because you've just been into the story, and then you get to certain parts. And then it's like just the fear of God would just hit me, and realize we are so far off the mark and we are not seeing this. And it's actually remapped how I even think about when I watch like Olympus Has Fallen. I went and saw that movie. I don't know if you've seen it, but in part because of reading that book. And in the end of the movie, the final closing scene is actually a speech where the president in the movie basically ends up saying the same thing that is in the book. We will rebuild, we will come out stronger. And it's showing the White House destroyed and all that. Of course, that is just Hollywood. But now I'm even seeing the same thing, and it's like, it's so true. This is the response of our nation. That's, most people who've talked to me, they said, well, they couldn't put it down, or they finish it within, most people finish it very quickly in 3 days, 2 days. I mean, everybody has the thing, and it's because in a sense, the drama is real. It's not something made up, and it affects everybody. I mean, it seems like you also put it very rightly. It seems like it's a Hollywood movie, but it's real. If you came up with saying, okay, there's an ancient mystery that's behind everything that's happening, it's like, well, okay, that's a Hollywood thriller, but it's real. And the other thing is, a lot of times people are reading it and they said, I want to. This can't be. Let me check this out on the internet. Exactly.
And this happens all the time, and they check it out and say it's there. And I'm glad people check it out, because it's real and it's happening. And that's how. But my reaction to it, I was the first to be blown away. In other words, I was like, because and you asked how did it come? Is also that the Lord always made sure that I was just being led, because there's a time that when I needed to know something, like someone would say the right exact thing, that would be the next key, and then, or I'd be on the computer and something would just come up that would be the next key. So I was the first one to have the reaction, and then it's gone forth. I don't take credit for it.
Exactly. You really feel probably like the man in the story. Where you were just being led.
Yes.
Because there's no way. I would say, it is humanly impossible. It was humanly impossible for you to write that book apart from divine revelation. And it is a word for America today, a critical word. Can you just share a few of the Harbingers? Obviously, people have to read the book. But you can give a teaser here.
Without going into a lot of detail, there are 9 harbingers or prophetic signs that appear in the last days of ancient Israel, and they're all linked to this strike. It's literally a terrorist strike that comes on the land. That's a warning that God allowed. It was a warning, a shakeup to the nation, but they didn't come back to God. They make a vow of defiance against God and against basically what happened, that they're going to come back stronger than ever before. And in this vow, it's recorded in Isaiah 9:10. This becomes the decoder, in a sense, of the Harbingers. And there are several ones. For instance, one involves a stone. You could call it the stone of judgment. And this has to be, for this to happen, and all these things happen in ancient Israel after the attack, the stone has to be quarried out of a mountain rock, has to be this massive rectangular block of stone, has to be brought back to the ground of destruction. After 9/11, the people of New York go up to the mountains of New York. They quarry out a stone, a massive rectangular block of stone. They bring it to New York City. They bring it to ground zero. They lay it on the pavement. They have a ceremony around the stone. The leaders of New York and New Jersey gather around the stone. The governor, the mayor, they pronounce vows of defiance over the stone, just as they did in ancient Israel in its last days. You go down Isaiah, it says, then it talks about the sign of the sycamore, that the sycamore was struck down in this attack. So the sign of the sycamore is a biblical sign of national judgment that happens more than once in the Bible, a warning to a nation that will be uprooted if it doesn't come back to God. In the last moments of 9/11, as the last tower comes down, it sends forth a shockwave, and it sends forth a beam into the air, and it strikes an object. It strikes a tree, and the tree happens to be the sycamore. The sycamore, the sign of the sycamore, manifests at ground zero, is struck down, and they put it on display. They have no idea what they're dealing with. The next thing in there in ancient Israel is that it says that they will replace that sycamore that was struck down in the attack with another tree. The other tree is going to be a stronger tree. In English, you read, it says we'll do it with cedars. The word in Hebrew is erez tree. It can be a cedar, it can be a spruce. It means an evergreen, pine, or panacea tree. So for this to happen, they have to do this act of replacing one tree with the other. You know, it happened in ancient Israel. Well, what happens 2 years after 9/11, a tree appears in the sky at the corner of ground zero. It's being lowered into the ground. They're putting it in the exact spot to replace the fallen sycamore of 9/11. And they have no idea what they're doing, but they're performing the exact act. And they have a ceremony around this new tree. They call it the tree of hope. They say we're not going to be conquered. And the tree that they put it in is not a sycamore. It's a biblical erez tree, the same tree of Isaiah. But then it gets even more, because then one of the harbingers in the book is the vow itself, that a leader of Israel would have to made this vow that led to judgment, which is Isaiah 9:10, talks about the bricks are fallen, and that pronounced judgment on the nation. And so what happens is, for this to happen in America, for this, an American leader would have to do this, but what American leader in their right mind is going to do that? But 3 years after 9/11, on the anniversary of 9/11, an American leader gets up in Washington. It's John Edwards. He gets before a congressional caucus on the anniversary of 9/11, and he, out of his mouth, he proclaims the ancient vow of judgment, word for word, that led to the destruction of ancient Israel. He has no idea what he's saying. And on the day after 9/11, the American Congress gathers on Capitol Hill to give the nation's response to the calamity. One man is chosen to give it. He's Tom Daschle. He's the head of the Senate. He gets on the podium that morning and he says there's a word. As he reaches the end of his speech, as he gives America's response, and out of his mouth he proclaims to the House of Representatives, the Senate, in the annals of Congress, the ancient vow of judgment from Isaiah 9:10, word for word. He speaks about the tree falling. He doesn't even realize there is a tree that's just being discovered that day. He speaks about the stone being placed. He doesn't realize that's going to happen 3 years later to after he says it. He speaks about the replacing. Everything he says is going to come true. And he says, that is what we will do, he says. And it actually is prophetic, because it's going to lead to where we are now, because since 9/11, we have not grown closer to God as a nation, grown much farther from God. And so the second, there's the mystery of the Harbinger is that it gives the progression of what happens next. And what happens is, if the nation turns away from the first shaking, there's going to come another shaking. And the second shaking is the collapse of the American economy, the shaking of our power. And it happens a number of years later. And behind that are all these biblical ancient mysteries, some of which even give the exact timing, the day that it's going to collapse. It gives the hours of when it collapses, and it's down to the hours. I mean, that's how precise and amazing it is. So there's so much, and we're just touching on some, but there's so much.
It is, and for people who haven't read the book, now they're completely lost, but that's their fault. They need to go buy it and read it. But
if you're completely lost, definitely read the book, because you're going to get saved. Okay.
But Harbinger, and again, we're using this word, and you did mention it, but just to clarify, which I should have done in the beginning, but what exactly? It's not just the title of your book.
Yeah, Harbinger means a foreshadow of something that's going to come, a warning. It can be a warning of something that's going to come. It can be good or bad, but often it's in the Bible and in the Harbinger, it's a warning of judgment, a prophetic warning.
Yes.
And,
Yeah. So, if you could just speak a word to our nation, which you are doing in a lot of interviews and media, but what is the word right now that's in your spirit?
Return and repent and well, for this, if someone's listening and they're not in God, and they're saying, well, wait, judgment's coming, how can I be safe? The word in Hebrew for safety is Yeshua, and Yeshua is Jesus. He is the safety. And if you're not in him, there's no safety. If you're in him, you don't have to fear. If you are in him, though, if you're a believer, the word is, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their evil ways, I'll hear from heaven, I'll forgive their sin and I'll heal their land. And the call is to his people, because people say, is it going to be revival or judgment? And what I'm led to say is it can be both. There can be judgment and revival. In fact, sometimes revival only comes through judgment or shaking, and it can happen at the same time. But the key for revival it doesn't come from Washington, it doesn't come from Hollywood, it comes from my people, if my people. If it doesn't come from us, it's not going to happen. And so that's where it begins. And if we were truly being the light to the world or to America that the church was supposed to be, it could never have been as dark as it's gotten. If we were the salt of the earth that we were supposed to be to America, it could never have become as rotten in the culture as it's been. So the call is for us, and the call is that, don't say tomorrow, because the time's late. That's what the Harbinger is saying. And the time is that it's now if there's anything we have to put away from our life, now is the time. If there's anything that's under judgment, anything that has no place, we have to put it away. And then and whatever God is calling us to rise to it says, pray and seek my face and turn from their evil ways and spread the word, spread the gospel, spread the word. We have to be lights. If the culture gets darker, we have to get brighter. We have to get more radical, and it's time to get more serious. That's what it's about. That's how it was in the beginning with the book of Acts. That's the way we have to be. So it's a call for that. So God is calling his people to be what we were always supposed to be, but the stakes are higher now, because these are, too much is given, much is required for America and for God's people in America. So that is his call. I mean, without any question, he's calling return.
Amen. It's a very good word. And what I see is that God has given you a message that like you said, it's beyond you.
Yeah.
But what I sense in the heart of God is a real longing in his heart to raise up hundreds, thousands of individuals who will, like you said, starting at that point of just first repenting, turning, seeking the face of God, but then being willing to be that. Where did God find you? Like, when did Yeshua come in?
Well, I was raised, I'm Jewish, and I was raised in a Reform Jewish home, which is the least religious of those who go to temple. Okay. I was brought up in the Hebrew school. My father came from Germany under Hitler. And met my mother. Both of them were scientists. They met each other, and so I grew up in the temple. When I was about 8 years old, I questioned everything. I said, I'm reading and I'm hearing about the God of the Bible who speaks and moves and talks to the prophets, and I looked at the synagogue and there was none of that. There was no real presence. So I said, this doesn't exist. So I became an atheist when I was 8 years old. And that I was like that. It lasted till I was about 12 or 13 when I said, atheism doesn't work. There's got to be something. I started losing faith in that. I said, there's got to be something behind everything. You can't. And so I started seeking everything I could get. I started seeking every book on religion, on science, on the occult, Nostradamus, the UFOs, everything. And one day I picked up a book. I thought it was a UFO book because it looked just like a UFO book, and it was like God tricking me, because it was The Late Great Planet Earth by Hal Lindsey, which was all about end time prophecy in the Bible. And I'm like, wow. And Jesus in there. Okay, well, I've read about Jesus in the UFO books. He was in there. He's in everything. So I was open kind of through the back door. So I'm saying, wow, it's happening. I mean, and then I look at the Old Testament. I'm looking. It says he's going to be born in Bethlehem. The Messiah of Israel is going to die for our sins. And I thought all that was Catholic, and it's in our Bible. So I'm believing, like, in my head. I wasn't saved, and I'm telling all my friends about it. And I'm leading them to the Lord. But I wasn't saved. But I'm leading them to the Lord. So that's what was happening. And then so finally I realized I said, hey, you're telling people about this, but what happens when he comes back? You're not right with God. So I realized I had to come to the Lord, but I didn't want to, because I thought, I had a rock band, and I was doing everything a teenager does. And I said, I don't want to give this up. But, I thought, you come to the Lord, you join a monastery, and that's the end of your life. So I said, Lord, I'll make a deal with you. I said, if you give me a long life, I'll accept you when I'm about to die on my deathbed. That was the deal. So right after I did that the Lord, I was almost killed twice. And the first time it was in a car accident. It was a miracle that we didn't get killed. And the second was, I'm in a Ford Pinto and I'm heading to a train track at night. It's at night and the light is going like the train's coming, but people are crossing, so I thought maybe it's broken. So I go up to the, I enter the track, but I couldn't see where I was, because a dangerous track and people had been killed on it. But I'm going there and I see a light, and it didn't look like it was moving. It was the train coming head on. I was on the track. I didn't realize it. I'm on the track, and I said, you know what, maybe just to be safe, I'll try to back up a little bit just to be safe. But now there are headlights in back of me, And so I backed up maybe a foot. I thought that's just extra, I'm fine. I was still in the path of the train. So I'm waiting for the train to come, and the train is coming, and the train comes and plows into the Ford Pinto, which was this little car. It goes up like aluminum foil, and the only thing I could do was call out to God. And I called out to God at that moment, and the car was destroyed, and I didn't get a scratch. So I said, okay, God, you're getting my attention. I said, can we renegotiate that deal? And I said, Lord, okay, instead of the deal we made, let's make a new deal. And I said, okay, I'll accept you, God, when I turn 20. That's the new deal, when I turn 20. So on my 20th birthday, like a man whose contract had run out and who was afraid that if he didn't come, he was going to get killed. I said, okay, God, I'm going to accept you. And I didn't know how. Nobody was leading me. And I went up a mountain. I knew in the Bible there are mountains. I went up to the top of a mountain, kneeled down on a rock, and gave my life to the Lord. And that's how I came, because of a train. If it wasn't for that train, I don't think I would have been saved.
Wow. And even in that, that story has my mind spinning, just all of the prophetic significance even in that. Not seeing where you were, following that because the other traffic was doing it, thinking it was one way. And even in that I see that false sense of security that you had. In a way, if I was just to tie this all back in, it's like the place that America's in. We're sitting on the tracks. We have a false sense of security. And we need to realize that light is a warning.
That's the first time anybody has put that together with that, but absolutely. And it's weird because whenever, I've led the congregation, we moved to different places, it's always has something to do with a railroad track. Like the last one we were across the parking lot was a railroad track. Where we are now, the road is called Railroad Avenue. I mean, everything is a railroad track, so it's like the Lord always reminds me. But that's true. I was waiting, I thought I was fine.
Exactly.
And that's how it is with a nation also that is under judgment. And God was saying, what happened is, but I needed that. I mean, and that's another thing. I'll try to maybe put it into a kind of bring it home, which will go with this.
Great.
There's one mystery in the Harbinger called the mystery ground. And it is that when the judgment came to Israel, it returned to the same place where the nation was dedicated to God, where the ground it was consecrated to God, which was the Temple Mount. And when the judgment came there, when the destruction came there, it was a sign that covenant's broken and God saying, return to where you've fallen from. Well, with America, there was a day that it began as a nation as we know it. It wasn't 1776, it was the day that Washington was sworn in as the first president. We had a president, had a government, and he puts his hand on the Bible, and he gives in his first address a prophetic warning of what would happen if America ever turns away from God. And it's coming true in our day, it's coming true. But then the entire first government goes on foot to a place to pray and dedicate America's future to God. That's the consecration ground. 2 hours dedicating America to God. The entire government. We can find out where it is. We've got a mystery. It was in the nation's capital, but the capital wasn't Washington, D.C. The capital was New York City. And where was it specifically? Where did they dedicate America to God? Where is our consecration ground? It all happened. Our consecration ground is ground zero. The ancient mystery, it returns to the place from where it began. And it's like God, we didn't even realize it. We're being focused there, but it's like, that's the beginning. That's where we're dedicated. And on that day, a shockwave goes forth from ground zero and strikes Federal Hall, the place where Washington gave that warning of what would happen if we ever turned away from God, and puts a crack in the foundation of America's foundation. And then all around Ground Zero, all the buildings are destroyed or ruined, except one is protected. And the one that's protected is the little stone chapel where they prayed and dedicated America. And the reason why it's protected, they said, is because there was an object that absorbed the force of the destruction, and the object was the Harbinger. It was the sycamore. It was the sixth Harbinger. And so bringing it back home, that the message of the Harbingers and the itself is not to condemn America to judgment. It's to save America. It's to wake up America. Sometimes we've gotten so deaf as a nation that it takes something. It takes like a trumpet call. One of the things. So the point is, people say, is there hope? If there was no hope, there'd be no harbingers, because why warn?
Yes.
Well, so sometimes it has to be like that. If it wasn't for that train bringing it home in my life, I wouldn't have come to the Lord.
Yes.
I needed that. And then I said, oh, wow, I was that close to eternity. That's what I needed. And so the same thing with the harbingers. That's the whole point. God is calling because his heart is salvation. And it's because we've grown so far that it takes a jarring thing to wake us up. It's like an alarm clock. It takes to wake up. But that is the thing. And whoever, those who are listening to this or watching this, whether Christian or non-Christian, is that, when you say, okay, well, what happens if there's judgment? Listen, we're all going to stand before God. There's a judgment coming. We're all going to stand before God, whether we see this, in our lifetime or whatever we see. And how far are we from that day of eternity? The answer is one heartbeat. We're always one heartbeat from that day, from the day we're going to stand before God. And so, take that heartbeat as God knocking and saying, get right with God. Now is the time.
Amen.
It's like the trumpets are sounding. That's the call of God. Now is the time. Whatever you have to do, do it now. Whatever if you're going to don't say tomorrow. If you're going to get right, do it now. If you're going to get forgiven, do it now. If you're going to forgive, if you're going to tell someone you love them, do it now. Do what you have to do now, because now is the day of salvation.
Amen. That is the perfect closing word. Thank you very much for being with us, for sharing, and thank you for joining us.